My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently?
We have been playing a couple of sessions of a brand new series of Dungeon World that I am running called The Song of the Milk-White Putrescence. What do you think of that name? It's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. You always come up with good color-based names.
I like, I always feel the need to name the series. I think it sets a certain expectation, right? Trade secret. I often have no fucking idea what the adventure is going to be about when I make those names up. I lead with the name, and then I try to think about what it means. So I thought The Song of the Milk-White Putrescence sounded really good, but now we're deep into it, and it's going great. You're a player in that game. How do you think it's going?
Oh, I really like it. I'm having a lot of fun exploring this town that you have set up of Frostdale and their ongoing political, economic thing where they're arguing about whether it should be frosted ale that they sell at the taverns or frost ale that they sell at the taverns.
Right. Yeah. There's a contingent that really believes in calling it frosted ale because it's spelled like Frostdale, right? So, or almost spelled like Frostdale. It's. I'm glad you're liking it. So the Song of the Milk-White Putrescence, in case listeners care about just the sort of basic story of what's going on so far, it's part of a bigger campaign that we're doing called We Hunt the Keepers. And the idea is that in the world, there is this sort of heretical offshoot of the church that locates and studies these entities, places, objects called keys. And in this setting, one of the keys is the Milk-White Putrescence. And so these keepers of the keys, we don't really know what their motivations are. We only know that the church wants to destroy them and kind of hide the keys, right? And so the player characters play groups of adventurers who are essentially mercenaries, who go out, Templars, mercenaries, that kind of thing, who go out and hunt down these keepers and kill them. And I have a couple of custom moves that are kind of baked into the setting, which I've added to the special move sheet, arbitrate what happens with the keepers and the keys when you encounter them and things like that. I might share some more of that later after I try these moves out a little bit more to make sure they work okay. But that's kind of the basic gist of it. And so the particular adventure is I'm doing kind of like a village mystery, the players have all arrived and there are things going on in the village, like strange things, mysterious things, murders and weird happenings, right? Right now, the big sort of weird thing going on in this village is that some of the people in the village are incredibly intelligent and are creating things and doing math problems and doing academic research, but they are otherwise just dirt farmers, right? So they have this weird surge of intelligence, and that's part of the big mystery of what's going on in Frostdale. Yeah. I mean, I'm loving how it's going so far, just from a story vantage point. We're only halfway through, so we can't say too much yet, but I really love the group of players. I think you guys are doing such a good job. We have Lowell on, who's one of my co-hosts on the Gauntlet podcast, who as good a GM as Lowell is, I think he's an even better player. I love having Lowell at the table, and then just playing with you and with Garrett and with Fraser, who I haven't played with in a while. It's just a great group.
Oh yeah, that's really what I wanted to highlight about what's going on with the Song of the Milk-White Putrescence is our group feels like it has been a traveling roam of adventurers together for a very long time.
Yeah. The party dynamics are incredible. They're so good. It's like you guys have been doing this for ages together, and I agree.
I don't know. I can't put my finger on quite how it happened. I mean, we kind of started in on some jokes that would appear to be inside jokes and acted like they had always been around within our group. And we had these little arguments and explanations and things that it seems like have been going on forever between our characters. But this is the first time that we've ever actually played them.
Well, I'd like to offer a theory for why I think there are a couple of theories. I think the reason why this party is like you guys have a really particularly strong dynamic. I think there's one thing that's maybe not easy to replicate, which is you guys are all just pretty good players, and like if I had to pick in the gauntlet like a dream team of players, like I'm not sure I could do any better, right? Like it's a really, really good sharp. You all really like pick up on this idea of helping each other create story for each other, you know, as opposed to just focusing on your own character. I think that's a really like integral part to making a group work, which is like, I've called it GGG, right? And I've talked about that a million times, but like this idea of I am not just interested in my story, I'm interested in our story. I want to see your character do this thing, right? So I think that's one part of it, which is maybe not easy to replicate. Another part of it, I think, is flags. I think we're getting better and better at flags. Like I really do. Like our process for flags and for getting flags out on the table and figuring out how we're going to do them in the scene or in the session is pretty solid. And that kind of segues to another thing that this is the usable thing, I think, for listeners. I have really lately, I don't know if you noticed this or not, David, but I've been really, really refining my pre-session procedure for how we do things before the session starts. And by refining it, I mean just dragging it out a little bit, but like in an effective, constructive way. So, you know, I started like about 6 months ago, I started doing this thing where I was like, hey, let's talk about what kinds of scenes you might want to have, right? Like, let's talk about that. And that was pretty effective. I think that started getting us all to a really good place. Here's something I've started doing lately, and I like it even better, which is I actually talk about my threats and my fronts, right? I did this in Monster Hearts and I did it in Dungeon World. I was like, hey, at the beginning of the session, I don't know if you recall, but I was like, I've worked this thing and this thing and this thing that we talked about last session. I've worked those things into my fronts. I don't need anything else here. I've got this ready to go. However, this other thing that you mentioned last session, I need more there. And so I want to explore that more so that I can add that to my fronts. I'm being really explicit about where I'm at in my front creation. And I feel like I got what I needed. You know, like I feel like I'm getting what I need from you guys in terms of making sure that my thinking of the story is meshing up with what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, I did notice that. And I thought it was interesting. It's very non-traditional. To
super
share
non-traditional,
that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
to share that kind of information with your players in advance and ask for input on them. That is not the traditional role of a game master, but I liked it, and maybe that's because like almost everyone at the table is a game master or game writer or
right, yeah, yeah. There's that too. Yeah. We're all kind of like that person, right? I mean. Here's, you know, it's a little non-traditional. It's almost heretical in a way, as far as like GMing goes. I like to be a bad boy. What can I say? You know, look, here's the deal. Like, I just think that like the more we look at our role as GM and players as like the writer's room of a TV show, the more we look at our role as like collaborative storytellers, I think you naturally go to that place of sharing information out of character and helping one another build on that. Because what we're doing is we're having that conversation out of character, and then we're very easily slipping into character and playing the scenes out to see where the scenes go, you know? And I just think it's great. I just like the way it's going, you know?
Yeah, I like it. And I like that you are approaching it very thoughtfully. And I think that, you know, when this all is said and done, we might be able to come up with a way of proceduralizing that. So lots and lots of people could use it.
Yeah. Maybe in DR Annual 2. Speaking of which, shall we go to the next one?
we should move right into our next segment. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For?
Okay, so real quick one. We just want to kind of put a bug in everyone's ear about this, but we have just begun. Well, not just begun. It's been going for a while, but we are in earnest working on the Discern Realities Annual. That is a special edition of our Zine Codex that is going to cover the first 40 episodes of the Discern Realities podcast. It's going to have all of our original custom moves that we've talked about over the course of those episodes. It's going to have all of our original magic items and monsters and other things. It's going to have a lot of our play advice. I'd like to work some play advice in there. It's going to have all those things, but in a sort of magazine format in a PDF so that you can have that information at your fingertips and peruse it as you need. And we're also going to try to include select entries from our various contests that we held over the first 40 episodes. We will not be able to do all the entries because it would be too much. Like there's like
I don't know how many pages it would be.
There's no way. It'd be hundreds of pages. There's no way. But like we're gonna go through and we're gonna like make some. We're gonna get in touch with those people first of all who submitted them to make sure, see if they don't mind if we do this. But we're gonna have sections where we have some select entries from those, and I think it's gonna be a great thing. It's something that people ask us for all the time. Like they always say like, hey, where do I find the text for the labyrinth move? That's one I get a lot. Hey, where do I find the text for this particular magic item or anything from the first 16 episodes, because they're not on the website. Like good luck finding anything from those. So yeah, we're going to put all that stuff together for you guys. We're going to make it available as I think we're going to do it at like the low level Patreon entry level, like the $2 level. So just give it to basically entry level Patreon thing. So just keep your eyes open for it. Yeah,
and if you're still listening to this and you are somebody who has submitted something a long time ago to one of our contests, please send us an email saying we can use that. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Oh, fuck yeah, that would make our lives so easy if you guys would just send us a message and say you are free to put all of my entries into Codex if you want. I mean, I should say, someone asked me this the other day on back channels. The Gauntlet is not a profit venture. Okay, like literally every dollar that comes in from the Patreon gets spent back into the community. Like we don't pocket any of that. Like if you're worried about like us using your magic item to enrich ourselves, fear not. That is not what's happening. But we do think it would be cool to like make to put it out there in a nice looking form for people to enjoy. So.
Yep. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. Jason, this week I thought we would talk a bit about how to keep your players that may not have been in a session for a while, how to get them back into the sessions, and then how to work with a rotating cast of characters and players, because that's really how you kind of keep a longer running series of games going, and that's what we do here at the Gauntlet, and I think we've got some expertise in that.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're good at. I mean, we organize games in that way. We explicitly are like, hey, even if you can't make all 4 sessions, if you can come to 2 or 3 of them, that's cool. Like, come, we want you to be there. And so we kind of, at the outset, position ourselves to say, okay, well, we may have a situation where we don't have the same group of people every session, right? So we need to like figure out, what to do. Or, your next, the next 4 or 5 sessions we're running might be half that group from before and half a totally different group, because we don't really know what we're getting. Yeah, we do have a lot of experience with that. I think this is a really good topic. I'm anxious to talk about this.
Yeah. So one of the things that kills a lot of game groups and a lot of ongoing campaigns is the fact that players have lives and they can't make it to every session, and sometimes they have stuff that comes up that means they can't make it to any sessions anymore. But that's not a reason to stop playing or to give up on gaming. You can do this online or in person. We used to do this face-to-face in Houston too. And I think a lot of that has to do with being accommodating and forthright with how long we expect this thing to go on. Usually for us, it's like a month, like four sessions or 5 sessions on like one particular day. And we let everyone know at the outset, you don't have to make every session, and that's okay. But we invite more people than we necessarily can have.
Well, and even if your goal is not to like create a space where you just have tons and tons of new people coming in all the time like we do, like even if your goal is just to like get a campaign going and not feeling and doing it to where you don't feel discouraged because your group is a little shaky sometimes. I mean, that is what discourages a lot of people, right? Like you how many times have we heard that story? Like, oh, I had a campaign going, but then such and such couldn't show up and we couldn't figure out how to make it work, and so we just stopped. I mean, that happens all the time, right? And so here's my thinking on it. Let's get into the meat of this. So obviously, in Powered by the Apocalypse games, the love letter is your best tool, right? I mean, that's the easy answer here. Not the easy answer. It's the most obvious answer. The love letter, in case listeners don't know what that is, it comes from Apocalypse World, and it is essentially a custom move that you have written for your absent character, so that when they do come back, or when you do have them, or maybe they're not there and you need to somehow justify their existence or whatever they're doing when they're away, you have this custom move that basically allows you to adjudicate and add some fiction into like where that character's been and what they've been doing, right? David, do you use love letters a lot? Like, is it something you lean on?
Absolutely. We had a situation where one of the players couldn't make one of the sessions in the Anglekite game where the giant was attacking the city. They were not there for the session where the giant began that attack. And the situation, the lead-up love letter was, you have been hiding this entire time. Where have you been hiding? And what are the horrors that you have seen as this city has been ravaged by this giant? And then it rolled into a custom move where they basically were, it was like, how rattled are you going to be by this experience kind of thing? But that was probably the most recent one that I've done, but I do them anytime a player can't make a session, but then it will be returned.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. And, I guess the next question might be like, well, how do you make a good love letter, right? Like, what is a good love letter? I mean, I'm not going to go into all the details of what a love letter is because it's kind of nebulous, if I'm being honest. It's basically, is what we just said it is, right? It's essentially a bit of text, a bit of fiction, a custom move that kind of fills in what that character was doing while they weren't with the group. I look at love letters, honestly, like, I don't even consider it a compromise anymore. I look at love letters as an opportunity. It's an opportunity. So, for example, in Song of the Milk-White Putrescence, Garrett couldn't make it for session 2 because he was having some internet troubles. And the nice thing is because I asked a fair amount of establishing questions in session 1 where he was there, I learned a lot about what his character's motivations and intentions are. And I learned, that, okay, we're all going to this village, but his character's interested in this abandoned temple just a little north of the village, right? And so I am thinking, this is some real time shit right here. I'm thinking, like, when he comes back for session 3, the love letter is going to be about him breaking off from the group once you got to the village and going ahead to the temple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my fronts. I'm going to look at my fronts and see what's going on in that temple, because I know. And then I'm going to basically, formulate a custom move that, like, basically it's going to be some sort of like, he has stated that his character has this like premonition or whatever, that there's, and I'm quoting him here, the brown creature of disobedience is in this temple and causing a disruption in the forest or whatever, right? And so I know what that is now because I made a front for it, but like he doesn't. And so what I'm thinking is I'm going to have, the love letter be about him, the way he explored that, the way he may have learned something about what the brown creature of disobedience is. And I'll have a 10 plus, a 7 and 9, and a 6 minus result. I'll do a 6 minus result because I think on a really fictionally specific thing like a love letter where it's not appropriate to have like real-time GM moves, I think a 6 minus result is a good thing in that circumstance. I don't normally like a 6 minus, but I'll set it up to where basically there'll be like 3 tiers of like either information with possibly some complication, right? But it's all going to be things that like will be able to like happen off screen, right? That we can kind of just narrate having happened. And so I view it as an opportunity because now we've moved closer on my fronts, right? We're introducing a big part of the fiction back into the group. And so like we haven't lost anything. Right.
That's absolutely how I am seeing love letters be more and more, is like, yeah, they're a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the way you have to look at it. Like you have to be willing to have that flexibility. You have to be willing to like look at your prep and say, okay, it sucks, I don't have this character, but I can work with this, I can make something out of this. I can make this work.
Yeah. And what happens when you start doing this is more and more your players will not be afraid to take the time off when they need it, and they will not be afraid to come back. They will be excited to come back.
Exactly. Because once you create this culture, like I believe we have, once you create this culture at your table, you give people permission to approach gaming in a way that fits their lifestyle and their schedule, right? A lot of people will shy away from things if they know they can't commit, right? But this gives like a little bit of wiggle room. It kind of says, hey, commit as much as you can. And you have to create that culture at your table. And I think having tools in place like this is a great way of doing it.
Yeah, 100% agree. But I think that's all I've got right now for advice on how to maintain that kind of culture and build that culture at your table or online or wherever you game. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I think I'm good. No, I think it was a great combo.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here is Useful or Valuable to Me?
Okay, our shrine contest is ongoing. Just to remind you, listeners, it is ongoing until May 31st. Entries should conform to the following requirements. It should be a shrine, that is to say, it should be a place where you go to worship a god or an entity of some sort. Your entry should include a short description of the god that the shrine is dedicated to, the shrine itself, and then there should be a custom move associated with the shrine. So like what happens when I pray at this shrine? There should be a magic item associated with the god. There should be a spell associated with the god, or alternatively, another magic item. Importantly, what we're trying to do here is it's essentially like a package of elements organized around a theme. In this case, the theme of a single god. All right. 400 words, please. No more than that, or otherwise we will not go through them. One winner will receive a $50 gift card to either Amazon or Drive-Thru, and then one winner and two runners-up will be invited to co-host the show. And if we get enough entries that are pretty solid, we will put them out in a free issue of Codex as well.
Awesome. I have selected one that has been submitted by Josh Gary, and this is Rakaela, the Forever Shield Maiden. Rakaela, the Forever Shield Maiden, leader of the heartbroken dwarven goddess of vengeance. Just as their children do today, the gods sometimes war against each other, but even during times of war, love can blossom. The dwarven gods called a ceasefire for the day of Rakaela and Ruzek's wedding. Sadly, it would seem that even among the gods there is no honor. The wedding was attacked, and Ruzek was slaughtered. The fire vengeance now burns in Rakaela's eyes forever. Usually depicted as the loveliest dwarves, always shown to be in her mithril wedding dress, battle axe poised for the kill. Her statues have burning coals or another means of conveying the fire of vengeance seen burning in her eyes. Rakaela will take pity on those whose hearts have been broken by the loss of a loved one and grant them the strength to gain their vengeance. But if you lie to her about the loss of a beloved, she will inevitably turn her vengeance against you.
All right, here's the custom move for the shrine. When you stand under her shrine and tell Rakaela the story of how your beloved was lost and how you intend to get your vengeance, roll plus charisma. On a 10 plus, choose one ability. On a 7 to 9, choose one ability, but it is unreliable and dangerous. On a 6 minus, Rakaela does not appreciate your lies. The options here are take +1 when performing any actions that further your goal of vengeance. To add this question to discern realities, who or what here will help me in my goal of vengeance. When confronting the one who killed your beloved, if you must roll last breath on a 6 minus, you still have one last chance to gain your vengeance, but it will kill you in the end. So those are your three options on that.
Yeah, and here is the first of two magic items. Rakaela and Ruzek's wedding rings. A beautiful pair of mithril wedding rings fit for the gods themselves. As long as you and your beloved wear these rings, you will know if each other's heart still beats. No matter how far apart or where either of you are, you can feel the pulse of the other.
And the other magic item is Rakaela's mithril wedding dress. It is 2 armor and 1 weight. This beautiful wedding dress, made of the finest of dwarven mithril, fits perfectly on whoever wears it. Under a full moon, you appear to be Rakaela herself. Anyone who is accustomed to heavy armor, that is characters with moves that ignore the clumsy tag, gain +1 dex.
Nice.
Very good. Thank you, Josh, for submitting that. I really like it. It's got like a little bit of story behind it. It's charmingly traditional, which I like. I think people try to be very like different all the time, but this like feels really like sort of like lived in terms of like fantasy tropes, which I think is fun.
The armor is doing something clever where it does that extra bit where ignoring the clumsy tag gives you something extra, and also like 2 armor 1 weight. Like if you're actually playing with like encumbrance and things like that, that actually is pretty important. You can't get that without having 3 weight and a clumsy tag.
Yeah, I agree. And also the I like that it kind of like hits on that too, because I will tell you that particular aspect of, I think it's like fighters and barbarians that usually get that.
Yep.
That is almost never invoked in any way in a game. Like when's the last time you had someone where the whether them not being clumsy with their armor was a big deal. Like, it's just one of those rules that I think tends to get forgotten. So I kind of like that this like kind of like invokes it a little bit.
Yeah, it gives it new legs. But yeah, thanks for submitting that, Josh. Yeah. And listeners, I can't wait to see what other submissions we get that come into our mailbox.
Incidentally, which is gauntletpodcast@gmail.com. That's where you can send your entries.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment.
This episode of Discern Realities is being sponsored by Slade Stoller and Scablands Press. Just a reminder, you can get both PDF and print-on-demand softcovers of Scablands' game The Indie Hack by visiting DriveThruRPG. You can also get an adventure and quick start rule set for The Indie Hack on DriveThru called Noises in the Old Theater. And if you go to the Scablands Press website, you'll find a system reference document for the Indie Hack, which includes all the core rules for the game presented to make it easy for you to adapt to your own setting. Slade's own game, Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers, which was recently successfully kickstarted, is based on that SRD, as well as a game by Maria Rivera called Heroes and Crystal Kingdoms, to be featured soon in the Gauntlet's RPG Zine Codex. I also think game designer and Thomas Novosel has been releasing a bunch of free material on the Indie Hack. We will include links to all those things in our show notes. Thanks again to Scablands for sponsoring the show.
Our next segment is What is About to Happen? Listeners, we're going to switch things up a little bit now. We're going to leave Ramshackle right where he is, in that room with three doors near death, and with Father Time outside one of them. And we're going to pick up a story about a new character. A character that Jason is going to play. Jason, would you like to introduce your character?
Dum, dum, dum. The big switcheroo. Yes, I would love to introduce my character. I am going to be playing, I'm going to be using the alternative playbook, The Priest, by Jacob Randolph. So if that's cool with you, David, I'm going to be the priest. I think I like the more like freeform nature of the priest praying and divine magic as opposed to picking spells for this. And I'm going to be playing my priest. My priest is actually a self-identified saint. Okay. She is referred to as a saint by some, and she's started to call herself a saint. And her name is Saint Evelyn the White.
All right. Saint Evelyn the White. I believe I have heard of this person before.
You may have heard of her. You may have killed her in a previous Dungeon World adventure I've run. There's a good chance.
That may have happened.
I'm all about using our AP to basically fiddle with the meta plot in all my face-to-face games. So in all my group games.
Awesome. So, Saint Evelyn, when did you decide, or when were you inspired that you were a saint?
I did not assume the title of saint initially. I didn't want it. I was originally called the Mad Saint. I was viewed as somewhat heretical in my order. I have a particular philosophy that some don't like. So I was called the Mad Saint.
Okay, well, is that what you consider your deity? Is this philosophy, or unpack that for me a little bit?
I think my deity is dual-natured God. I like a classic sort of like duality of man, woman, husband, wife, brother, sister, that kind of thing. Sun and moon, right? Real classic. And I think they are called Oron and Lunan. And the whole idea behind the bigger church is that we are all trying to be perfect men and women like Oron and Lunan were. And so we strive for perfection. And that has been extrapolated out over the centuries and over various, geographies and communities to mean different things. I think there are lots of maybe local saints wherever we go. I have my own sort of personal interpretation of what it means to achieve like our little slice of perfection. I think a big part of like being a perfect person is showing mercy and charity. And so I try to be a merciful and charitable missionary, I guess, minister.
I see. So you're on the road traveling to the next place where you can be merciful and charitable. And I'm curious what has made you pick this particular small town of Fellbit as the place where you need to be.
Fellbit is actually a pretty good name because it is a village that is currently right in the middle of a terrible war. It's a bleak, dark time around Fellbit, a fell time, if you will. And I think there's a lot of suffering. I don't think there's enough food. And I am coming there to basically alleviate the burdens of the people who are in the village of Fellbit.
Okay. And you're traveling alone?
I am traveling alone. I don't have many friends in the clergy because of my methodologies.
And what exactly is that? Why do they consider what you believe heretical?
I believe that it is cruel to bring children into a bleak, war-torn world.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. But you're going to go help children?
I'm going to go help would-be mothers have an easier time of it so they can build a life for themselves. That's what I'm going to go do.
And you're still about a day out of Fellbit. The countryside is bleak. The fields are untended, as as all of the men and young men and able-bodied women have gone to war. What is it you see that lets you know that this town has fallen on harder times than any other town in particular that you've been through?
The first thing I see is a stripped dog carcass. I think things have gotten so bad in Fellbit that they've taken to eating their service animals, basically. And that's a problem. I see all around scorched land, right? I mean, if you think about like that movie, The Road, that was based off that Cormac McCarthy novel, it's like that, right? I think it looks really, really scorched. And I think the people here are just like scavenging for like whatever kind of like mushrooms or whatever might be growing underneath the whatever. I don't know how biology works, but I think they're just like scraping for whatever little, maybe finding some like shoots that might still be, still be usable so they can grow them somewhere else. Right.
And you refer to yourself as Saint Evelyn the White. Does that have to do with your clothing?
Oh yeah. Well, no, not necessarily. Does not have to do with my clothing necessarily, although I do I've taken to wearing white, but that was only because I've sort of like adopted this brand essentially that's been thrust upon me. The white comes from something different. The white comes from purity, from pure bodies. That's what white comes from. So
you're traveling down this road in this soot-covered land in your white vestments.
I stand out, huh?
You stand out. You see a small band of really ragtag-looking soldiers coming down the road towards you. They're still a ways off, and it's unclear if they've noticed you or not. They look particularly ragged. Their armor and vestments are covered in this soot. Their faces appear to be covered in this soot from what you can tell. And they are they're not marching in an orderly fashion. They are just dragging themselves through. What do you do?
They're approaching me or they're behind me?
They are walking towards you, like as if they're going the other way, away from Fellbit.
I have found that once I begin espousing my philosophy, that men in particular have a really hard time with that, and they don't like me, and they don't like my thoughts about like what everyone's appropriate behavior should be during hard times. And so I'm going to try to get off the road and hide. I don't want to have this conversation again, basically.
That's probably wise. Go ahead and discern realities and see if there is a spot for you to hide.
I got a 4.
All right. You look left, you look right, and there's nothing but ashen fields. And you hear one of the soldiers say to the others, "Hey, look! Over there, there's someone. Someone in white looks like they're rich folk. Let's get 'em. And we will cut it there. That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
Discern Realities is a production of The Gauntlet. We have a website. It's gauntlet-rpg.com. We also have a G+ community. You can just go to the community section of Google+ and search for The Gauntlet. You will find us there. Go check out the Gauntlet YouTube channel. You can find it easily by going to YouTube and just searching for Gauntlet RPG, one or two words. It will pop right up there. We have an increasing number of actual play videos. We've started to make more of our videos, basically more of our games available. We used to keep that really private. We have lots of podcasts and things for you to enjoy there. And if you like what we do, we would love your support on Patreon, patreon.com/gauntlet.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.